back. Welcome back to the Road Forward. I got Matt and I got Flint, and of course I'm here. So a couple of really interesting articles we found I think you guys might like. Matt, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great, Alex. How are you?
Doing all right. Flint, and yourself?
Living the dream. Just living the dream.
Another
day in paradise.
Yeah, there you go. There you go. First thing I want to talk about, okay? And I know obviously me being always on the cusp and always like excited about me being the typical millennial. There you go. I'm a millennial. You guys I think are what? No, what are you guys? You guys are old.
Technically, I feel like I qualify as millennial, barely, literally by a few months.
Right, and I think the millennials are split into like two gaps. Some that are like way more technologically advanced, and some not. But me being the typical millennial, always excited about new technology. Recently came across this article from Fleet Owner. Okay, January 9th, 2023. PGT Trucking buys Nikola TRE battery electric Class 8 truck. And I just, as a former flatbedder, or I mean, not really a flatbedder, but as a hotshot carrier pulling flatbed trailers, seeing these containers. Okay, I've hauled similar containers like that, and I sent you guys the article so you can take a look at the picture. But seeing those containers pulled behind an electric, like flat nose Nikola, it just so many thoughts. Like, first of all this bad press about Nikola, I guess that hasn't stopped them from making deliveries, and to see like loads that I actually hauled, and this is a Pennsylvania-based dedicated flatbed hauler, PGT Trucking, which I just thought was interesting. I know I sent you guys the articles. So, Flint, what are your thoughts on this electric delivery for this flatbed company?
I mean, congratulations to them for being on the cutting edge of battery powered short range technology. I don't know what to say, right? Like, as cool as these electric trucks are, it seems to me that they're still a long way. And again, I don't know what PGT's like operation strategy is for this electric truck. They certainly work in certain geographies and certain use cases, 100%. So look,
right, so
I mean, congrats on being an early adopter, right? I guess that's what I can say.
Article says the truck on select customer account, primarily operating on local dedicated routes.
Yeah.
And that's the issue. The issue is like the batteries weigh a whole bunch and the range is just extremely limited. And so it's like, maybe I always question, right? Like having a somewhat of a marketing background, I always question the articles and their intent, because it's like, I mean, maybe there are some people out there that are like, oh, this is so cool, I want to work for a forward-thinking trucking company. And sure enough, you get one truck. And the article actually says they're trying to get to 35%. Yeah, 35% by the year 2025 of their fleet. 35% will be electric by 2025. And so it's like, I mean, that's not even a lot, right? Like 35%, I mean, maybe I'd have to pull them up, but whatever. Let's assume they have 10 trucks, 20 trucks, whatever. 35% would be like 3 or 4 or 5, 6 trucks or something like that. Not a lot, and we all know that they're expensive. The battery technology is good, but it's just heavy. And so it creates a lot of challenges that you can't implement fleet wide. But from a marketing perspective, it's like you immediately get to attract the drivers that think or you have the optics that you're a forward-thinking company. And I mean, I guess that's one way to recruit, right? And that I don't know. PGT might be a great company. If you're in charge of PGT, hit me up. We're always taking interviews. We'll love to have you.
Yeah, we'd love that.
Right, because I have some questions about electric trucks that I have yet to get answered. So, but it is interesting, Matt. What are your thoughts on you're our California consultant liaison. So what's your thoughts on electric trucks?
Don't plan any routes into California, because if they have a heat wave, then the grid shuts down and your truck shuts down. So first, like we were talking last week, don't talk to me about electric until I start hearing nuclear. Because how are we going to power this grid? Put everything on the grid. Got to power the grid. But I mean, it sounds cool, right? It sounds great.
Yeah.
I'm not against piloting it. I'm just like, the grid itself is still powered by fossil fuel. So until I start hearing some viable options for how to power the grid, I'm not as excited about the electric vehicle technology. But that's just
and look,
me.
I've got some practical concerns, right? Besides the
Mhm.
whole grid and like fossil fuels and climate change and all that stuff, here's my practical concerns for PGT, and I'm sure that they've considered this, right? Or for any company that's thinking about electric trucks,
Mhm.
is what is your salvage value? Like, what's the expected life and service cost look like versus a traditional, diesel powered truck? And what is a resale? What does a salvage value look like? Because I've got to think that if 5 years from now, right, this truck has been in operation. Again, I don't know what changing the batteries and all that stuff look like in these. I've got to think that you're selling that truck back into a very limited pool of buyers, people who can essentially use it the same way that you've used it on local, dedicated, low mileage, low weight kind of stuff. And so, I mean, to me, that would probably be my biggest concern as a potential buyer of these trucks. And of course, you might buy one and pilot this thing out and see how that actually plays out. But that would be my practical concern financially for them.
Right. And I think I looked up the correct company. It looks like they do have 822 power units. So
Yeah,
I take it
so
back.
it's like
I think
one
earlier
truck.
I said earlier I said they might have 20 trucks or so, but it looks like they're a pretty sizable fleet. So I mean it's good. They're trying to make moves, but certainly like Tesla, the Tesla semi truck is you could say at the cutting edge of the battery technology and charging. And even still, there's limitations with the charging infrastructure. And so whether you're looking at it from the grid perspective, like Matt, like, hey, what are we doing about the grid when we're increasing all this demand? Or you're actually looking at it from a charging, everything has a life cycle. Like what are you going to do once this thing ages out? Like, where do you sell it? And so, like Clint said, there's a lot of interesting concerns. So, I mean, these would be great questions for PGT. So, but I just thought it was the coolest thing seeing this flat nose truck pull this. It looks like a 48 or a 53 spread axle flatbed. Probably a 53 since it is a spread axle, but it just looked super cool. But I know, Flint, you wanted to talk to us about kind of a follow-up to last week. I know Matt talked about last week about CES and autonomous trucks was all in the news, and now you want to talk to us a little bit more about autonomous trucks. What do you got go? What did you see?
Well, yeah, look, I mean, we talked a lot about last week about kind of how some of this autonomous technology would, improve the industry and all this stuff. And so then there was this article that I saw in FreightWaves about autonomous trucking Shakeout, which I thought was really interesting. Like a little bit more market analysis here, right? But you've got several of these autonomous players that have raised a lot of money, entering a time in the economy when interest rates are high. It may be difficult to raise more money. It feels like the technology is still a long way from general consumption or even entering the market in a lot of cases. And so I guess the question is like, how many of these companies do you actually need competing for this mobility, right? This autonomous truck. And so this article goes on to talk about how a lot of these companies have more cash on their balance sheet than what they're trading for on the stock market. So if you look at the ones that are public, you could buy, what's the example here that they give? I lost the name
They
of the
talk
company.
about Too Simple.
Yeah, Too Simple, right? So Too Simple is trading for $2 a share. And so they're sitting here saying, well, as a trader, you could actually just go buy all of Too Simple stock for less than the cash on its balance sheet. And so like that's a really strong indicator of what the market right now thinks of the future prospects of autonomous trucking. Like you are literally worth less than the cash you have in the bank right now, which is like gotta not be a good feeling if you're in the autonomous truck space, right?
Right. And Too Simple is one of those companies like it's a challenge because like certainly I have no doubt they have a lot of talented engineers, software people like doing all the actual difficult things. But certainly, like, it seems like they were somewhat overhyped because, obviously they announced layoffs and then they had all those C-suite executives just totally stepped down, which was kind of ridiculous. And then on top of that,
yeah, but we've seen this before, right, Alex? We've seen this time and time again from these autonomous. They come out, they raise a ton of money, they make a big splash, and then like 3 years later, they're kaput. They're out of business. I mean, I feel like we've seen this now for like, what, 6-7 years?
Right. Yeah. It's going to be interesting, especially with what seems like is a somewhat of a recession around the corner. It's going to be really interesting to see what their go-to-market strategy is. Like, how are they going to get actual revenue from customers in the door? Because like I've been trying to study autonomous trucks a whole bunch, and like for all I hear is like the sensors on those trucks alone are like $500,000. So you got like a $200,000 truck, and you got $500,000 worth of trucks sensors, and so that gives you a $750,000 truck. It's like, I mean, it better drive itself, otherwise that you can't. Like, how do you afford that and then still have a driver in there? It's like the only reason that makes sense if you can get the driver out. And with legislation in many states, like blocking level 4 autonomy completely, it seems like they're going to have a lot of challenges up ahead. Matt, what are your thoughts?
Well, I actually had a question or a couple questions on that. Do you think they're failing because of where the technology is right now and the true potential of the technology, or is it the industry that maybe is causing, like, not properly understanding the industry, regulations? I mean, what do you think is causing these folks to kind of balloon up and then pop so quickly? Is it the strategy, do you think? What are you seeing, Alex, in your or Flint, in your research?
Yeah, I mean, I think in this specific example, because it's not that like Too Simple is about to go out of business. I mean, they've got plenty of cash, right? I think it's more about forward-looking expectations of the general market in terms of how quickly will this come to market. Because I think a few years ago, people were like, oh, autonomous trucking, let's throw billions of dollars in that. That's going to be a game changer. It'll be here in 1 year, right? Like there'll be self-driving trucks in a year. And that was like 7 years ago. And so I think that this idea that this is just right around the corner is starting to become apparent now that like 3 rounds of these companies have, maybe technologically gotten pretty close to figuring it out, but they can't go to market because of the whole environment, right? Whether it's legislation or tort or whatever it is, like there's just not a very clear path to market. And I think that that's, becoming pretty evident.
Right. And investors are like, well, I don't want to throw more money after what is it? Good money after bad. It's like,
yeah, right. Well, look, I mean, if somebody can figure it out, if you can go to market, this is huge, right? I mean, it would be a game changer in transportation. It would be phenomenal, but it feels like we're just not getting much closer.
Right. And dude, from what I've heard about autonomous vehicles, and obviously the commenters can quote me if I'm wrong or tell me if I'm wrong, but to my understanding, to get like to 95% autonomy, where you're like basically good most of the time, is like easy, and the people can do it. But it's that remaining 5% that'll take just a really long time, and is the difficult part. So it's maybe I almost kind of feel like, if maybe you had a successful startup and you sold, and then you're like, dude, I'm really good at pitch decks and really good at marketing. Let's just find another impossible idea and just go raise some capital. You know what I mean? Like, that's kind of what it feels like. That some people are
like
good at marketing. Yeah, they're good at marketing themselves, but they underestimate maybe the challenge that they're taking on. And so they can pitch investors, they have a good network, and they can raise a ton of money. And all of a sudden they realize, oh, even if I hire 1,000 engineers and try to tackle this thing, it's still going to be really difficult. It's just going to be really difficult.
I've heard this saying, Alex, that there are people that are good at raising money and people that are good at making money, and it's two different. It's two different people.
That's a good one. That's a really good one. Speaking of good ones, Matt, you had a report. You want to talk about a report?
Oh, I thought you were referring to me specifically. The good one here. Okay. I see myself as that third guy on the podcast, like that color guy, just every once in a while throws something out there, tries to be funny. I feel like that's my role. But anyway,
Right.
proceed.
No, I think you want to talk about a report that you saw. What did you find?
Yeah, so took a look at the ATRI, the latest crash report, the causation of crashes. It's probably not breaking news that there's a strong correlation between certain driver behaviors and likelihood of collisions. I think it's really more of reinforcement of that, where we understand that aggressive driving, maybe lack of attention to detail in terms of best practices for lane changes, that sort of thing, increases the likelihood of a future collision, as well as a previous record of having preventable collisions. So I don't think there's anything crazy in that report. For me, what they're using is the citation as the kind of the leading indicator of a collision. Whereas, we totally understand, especially at our company, that there's ways to understand these behaviors and the frequency that they're happening without relying on somebody actually getting pulled over and getting a ticket on it. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to best understand what truly causes collisions and how to best prevent that. But I thought the really interesting thing in that report was that the pilot program for the sub 21 driver set is going pretty well, actually. And they actually mentioned that very limited in terms of the data set, so we can't draw any like strong conclusions just yet. But the kids are kicking butt right now. So the under 21 crew is doing well, and right now their frequency, their collision or incident frequency is much lower than the over 24 crowd. Again, so that's really limited set of data right now, but I'm just gonna put it out there. I think that's the direction that we should be going in. I think the 18 to 21 crowd will be perfect for the industry, and I think they'll be more receptive to using technology, to best practices like training, and as long as we're willing to embrace that, I think that'll be a great thing for the industry.
Okay, I want to quickly just take a step back before, because I have some pushback on that. So you called it ATRI, but it's just for clarity, it's ATRI, American Transportation Research Institute. The report that we're discussing is the Predicting Truck Crash Involvement 2022 update. It looks like the last time they published this report was in 2018, and then the time before that was like in 2014 or 11 or 12 or something. So it's almost every 4, 5, 6 years that they publish a report like this. And it's really it's like I'm scrolling through this thing and it's in depth. Okay. And they cover a lot. But like Matt mentioned, they do look at the inspection data. So once if you're a professional driver, you get pulled over by the DOT, you get inspection. If there's violations on that inspection, that gets published to the FMCSA, the Federal Motor Carrier Safety Administration, and that's all public data. And so they're taking that public data and then tracking that to predict which inspections get accidents, also which is public reported. And what is interesting that I know you, Matt, you highlighted the 18 to 21. That I know there's it's just a pilot program, and obviously there's not a lot of drivers in there. What really blew my mind, I remember when I was talking to the insurance guy from F3, and he said BLT. Okay. Brakes, lights, and tires. I mean, I thought it was bacon, lettuce, and tomato, but brakes, lights, and tires. And if you notice the violations, the top violations, okay, number 1, lighting. Number 3, brakes. Number 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Number 6, tires. So it's like, my goodness, like sometimes there's these insights that you might just hear and just like not even pay attention, but they're just such good nuggets of like, yeah, if you take care of your brakes, lights, and tires, that will literally help you avoid a ton of violations, which is, I thought that was just ridiculous on this first graph.
How do you do that, right? How do you do that? It's good pre and post trip inspections. Like, let's just get right to brass tacks. It's good pre and post trip inspections. Look, I think that the whole young driver thing is really interesting, and I'm happy that we're in a pilot program on that. My opinion is, I don't, like, with a little bit of training, I don't know how how we're not letting 18-year-olds drive trucks. What do
Really?
you gain between 18 and 21 that all of a sudden makes it okay for you to drive a truck?
I think the one indicator, because the number one, just got to mention this, that I'm playing devil's advocate against my own point here, but the top indicator, a leading indicator of collisions, is aggressive driving. So I think, that might be the concern with the younger set, is that you'd be a little bit more aggressive. But I also think your faculties for reacting to things are top notch at that age, right? I think there's a lot of advantages you have. So if the aggressive nature maybe of youth perhaps could be restricted a bit or sublimated in some way, I think ultimately it would be a net gain for us to have that crew. Like we said, it's so cliche at this point, but I mean, if you're fit to fight, you could drive a commercial vehial.
But hold on, they also, like, what about, like, I don't know, the
shout out
brain
to the 88
is
mics
developed
out
in,
there in the
males.
military. Just want to throw that out there. 88 mics. They're doing a fine job. That's the MOS for driving large vehicles in the Army. So
okay, and so the military allows for 18 and over to drive large vehicles, right?
That's correct. Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, and to my understanding, like, you can drive semi trucks. If you're 18, 19, 20, you just can't do interstate. That's the thing. And so what they're trying to open up is like, well, you should be allowed to do you can't do interstate. And so now they're trying to allow interstate if you're over 18 but under 21.
Yeah,
and so that's what the pilot program is. But I thought, to my understanding about my limited capacity about the brain isn't fully developed, right? And so maybe their decision making, their risk assessment, to my understanding, is the problem, that they may not understand the risk, and so more than likely they might drive or they might do something that an older person might not do because they're a little bit like risk averse, to my understanding, right? That's the issue with under 21-year-olds.
I think that checks out. Thinking back to my past, certainly checks out anecdotally.
Right. Well, dude, yeah, if you're under 21, you're just like, yeah, sure, I'll jump off this mountain into the water that's 50 feet below me. It's like, yeah, let's go cliff diving. That sounds like a great pastime. And now I'm 30 and I'm like, my God, never in my entire life would I want to do that. Right. And so it's and that's
strange, why at the point where you have the most life to live still, you are more likely to take the risks, right? But if you're 80 years old, why not go for that cliff jump? I don't know if I should be pursuing this angle here, these thoughts, but
right. But to cover the crash predictor analysis, okay, that's table 6, page 15, crash predictor analysis. The number one, okay, in future crash likelihood increase of 141%. Okay, this is based on violation data and accident data. A failure to yield right-of-way violation increases your likelihood to crash by 141%, which that's crazy. Then a failure to use improper signal, a past crash. If you've crashed before, you're 113% likely to get into another accident. Which, I mean, and then of course, like Matt mentioned, a reckless driving violation. Now,
to me, that's the one that actually flies in the face of what I was thinking. I've always thought that a crash is like one of the more expensive ways to learn better driving techniques, and apparently, statistically speaking, that's not the case. People tend to, there's a recidivism rate for collisions, if I could throw a $10 word out there.
Right. But to really why wait? Right. Because the key thing here is this is what TruckSpy does. This is what we do. We have one of the best cameras on the market. And it's like, well, why wait until your driver gets a violation when with the camera technology that's available now, analyzed by AI now, like you could put a piece of hardware in your truck to analyze your driver behavior and reduce those negative driving behaviors by a ton. So this report really confirms the need for the technology that we're offering customers, that customers are using and they're benefiting from now. This is probably why we see our customers reduce the amount of accidents they have, reduce the amount of negative behaviors, because there's technology out there that can help you. Don't wait until the driver gets a violation. You can actually avoid that thing entirely.
the maintenance piece, preventing collisions, is interesting because my tendency is to focus on driver behaviors, just considering my background. But man, if you can prevent collisions before that truck even rolls out of the yard, right? I mean, that's just low-hanging fruit. I mean, so that's an interesting piece of the report.
You think
too.
It's low-hanging fruit, but I think it's harder. I think it's harder than you think, because I've been there, owned a fleet, managed a fleet. It's more difficult than you would think to stay on top of brakes, lights, and tires. I think the only way that you can do it, I mentioned earlier, was a really good pre and post trip inspection process, and somebody that is actually taking action on those driver reported issues pretty much immediately, right? Because what happens in most fleets, driver rolls in, let's pretend that our driver's doing pre and post trip inspections. They do a post trip inspection, perhaps on paper. They go stick it in a mailbox. 3 days later, somebody has received it. They can't read the handwriting, right? Like, this truck has now been on the road for 3 days with a light issue. It's actually harder than you think to get perfect here.
And I had a fleet too. So, and it was one of those things with owner operators. Hey, it's your truck and trailer. Like, if you're getting light violations in my company, like, you won't be here long. You know what I mean? So owner operators take care of their own stuff. But when it came to drivers, anytime they would have an issue, obviously I didn't have a humongous fleet, but anytime there was an issue, they'd give me a call. I'd say, great, like, buy it at the truck stop. I made sure that my lights were available at the truck stop. And so I would just make sure they buy it, submit the receipt, and I reimburse it next time I'm doing payroll, which would be weekly. So it's like the longest you spend $20 on a light. Okay, 3 days later, I run payroll and you get paid back for it, reimbursed, right? So I knew that could be a problem. And so I tried to do that really well. But I think that the challenge too, of course, is like when you're juggling, like, hold on, my truck is going to be down, for an afternoon while this guy looks for a light, installs it, does the wiring, whatever. That means I'm going to be late for my delivery. That means I won't factor or invoice the load in time, and that's going to make me less profitable. So then, sometimes obviously that happens where it's like, oh, it's the middle of the day. Okay, just drive, deliver this load, and then we'll fix it at night when lights are required, And that's yet another hurdle of balancing this, like, this safety aspect and pre-trip and post-trips with profitability, because everything affects your profitability. Every minor delay affects your profitability. And that's the challenges for fleets. Yeah, it's brutal. So especially right now too, with freight rates being as cheap as they are, with the rejection index being as low as ever, that just means like carriers are not rejecting any loads. They're taking every single load they can possibly get. So it's going to be a challenging, or we're starting 2023 with a challenging environment, right? By all accounts. So, but anyways, guys, thanks for jumping on. I think this is another good one. So hopefully we, if you have a fleet, let us know what you think. Let us, send us some stuff that you want us to cover or go over. Obviously, Flint had a fleet. I had a fleet. Matt is definitely an expert when it comes to safety. And so, if you ever,
I was a fleet of one. I was an owner operator. I was.
That counts. It counts, right? That's
didn't last long. I had a fleet of one, and it was my own vehicle. How great were my pre and post trip inspections?
Probably pretty good.
That package pressure, man. That daily package pressure. It's a real thing. It's a real thing. It's like, man, I know I should probably fix something, but I'm just going to try to get through this day, and then I'll do it, right? So there's a lot of natural tendencies we have as humans that get in the way, but
well, awesome. That'll do.
Cool. Just to discredit my actual driving experience. I had some.
I take it back. I'm sorry. Okay. 3 out of 3 people on this podcast have been fleet owners. All right. Well, this is a good one, guys. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next week.